It started as an ordinary evening in Washington, D.C. Senator J.D. Vance had just wrapped up a long day of meetings and decided to grab a quiet dinner at a well-known upscale restaurant near Capitol Hill. He walked in, dressed in a sharp navy suit, expecting nothing more than a meal before heading home. But the moment he stepped inside, something felt off. The hostess, a young woman with a tight-lipped expression, glanced at him, then at her tablet, and then back at him. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, her voice clipped and formal. "We can't seat you tonight." Vance frowned. "I didn't make a reservation, but I figured I could wait for a table." She shook her head. "No, sir. It's not about reservations. The owner has made it clear that we do not serve people who support certain policies." There was a brief silence. Nearby diners had started to notice the exchange. Some looked on with curiosity, others with quiet approval. A few had even begun filming. Vance crossed his arms. "Let me get this straight. You're refusing me service because of my political views?" The hostess said nothing, but the silence was an answer in itself. The tension in the air was thick. And then, J.D. Vance did something that left the entire restaurant in shock. For a long moment, J.D. Vance just stood there. The restaurant had fallen silent, waiters froze mid-step, diners whispered in hushed tones, and a few phones were still recording. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Then, instead of raising his voice or storming out in anger, Vance did something no one expected. He chuckled. A low, amused chuckle that caught everyone off guard. "You know," he said, shaking his head, "I served in the Marine Corps so people like you could have the right to refuse service to anyone you please. It's your business, after all. You can turn me away if you want." The hostess blinked, clearly unprepared for such a response. "But let me ask you something," Vance continued, his voice calm but firm. "Do you think this kind of thing makes America better? A country where we refuse to sit across the table from people we disagree with? A country where we divide ourselves so much that even a meal is off limits?" A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some diners looked uncomfortable. Others nodded slightly, as if considering his words. Vance gestured around the restaurant. "I bet there are people here tonight who don't agree with each other about everything. Maybe even about me. And yet, they're still sitting, eating, and talking. Isn't that what this country is supposed to be about?" The hostess hesitated, glancing toward the kitchen, where the manager was now peeking out, unsure of what to do. Vance smiled, but there was a sharpness in his eyes. "If you're so sure about this decision, I won't argue. But I just want you to think, really think, about what it means when we start treating people like this. What it leads to." The room was dead silent. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. For a few seconds, no one moved. The weight of J.D. Vance's words hung in the air like a thundercloud. The hostess, clearly caught off guard, shifted uncomfortably. Behind her, the restaurant manager had stepped out from the kitchen, his arms crossed as he observed the scene. Then, an older man at a nearby table, distinguished-looking, with silver hair and a sharp suit, slowly set down his fork. "He's right," the man said, his voice carrying through the room. Another diner, a woman in her 40s, nodded. "We don't have to agree with him. But kicking him out over politics? That's not who we are." Murmurs of agreement spread across the restaurant. A younger man, who had been recording the entire incident on his phone, muttered, "This is gonna go viral." The hostess glanced nervously at her manager, but before he could say anything, Vance took a step back. "Look," he said, his tone still steady, "I didn't come here to make a scene. I just wanted a meal. If you want me to leave, I will. No hard feelings. But just remember, when we start dividing ourselves like this, it doesn't end well for anyone." Then, something unexpected happened. A waiter, a young guy in his early 20s, stepped forward and quietly said, "Sir, I'll serve you." The room seemed to collectively exhale. The manager hesitated, then finally nodded. "That's fine," he said. "Let's get him a table." The hostess, looking flustered, stepped aside as the waiter grabbed a menu and motioned for Vance to follow him. The senator nodded at the young man, then turned back to the diners. "Appreciate you all listening," he said. "We can disagree and still sit at the same table." The tension had melted, replaced by something else, something quieter, more thoughtful. People had come expecting just another dinner. Instead, they had witnessed something bigger, a moment that, in a deeply divided country, somehow made everyone stop and think. As J.D. Vance took his seat, the cameras were still rolling. And by morning, the entire nation would be talking about what had just happened. By the next morning, the video of J.D. Vance's encounter at the restaurant had exploded online. Clips flooded social media, showing the moment he calmly confronted the refusal of service and how the restaurant eventually backed down. The reactions were immediate and divided. Some praised him for his composure. "This is how you handle political hostility, with grace and logic," one commentator tweeted. Conservative media hailed him as a champion of free speech and civility. J.D. Vance just gave America a masterclass in leadership, read a headline on a right-leaning news site. But on the other side, the backlash was fierce. Progressive activists accused him of orchestrating a publicity stunt. Vance plays the victim while ignoring actual discrimination faced by marginalized groups, one prominent political analyst wrote. Others doubled down in support of the restaurant's decision, saying businesses had the right to refuse service to politicians whose policies they disagreed with. By noon, the restaurant owner issued a statement. "Our establishment values inclusivity. While we regret how the situation unfolded, we stand by our staff's right to refuse service to those whose policies actively harm our community." Vance, however, didn't lash out in response. Instead, he made a simple post on his social media: "America is built on debate, not division. We don't have to agree, but we should be able to share a meal. That's the country I believe in." Within hours, that post had over 1 million likes and thousands of comments. Meanwhile, politicians on both sides of the aisle weighed in. Some used the incident as an example of growing intolerance in America. Others dismissed it as political theater. Even the White House press secretary was asked about it in a briefing, sidestepping the controversy with a vague statement about the right of businesses to make their own choices. But despite all the noise, one thing was certain: J.D. Vance had turned a simple dinner rejection into a national conversation. And whether people loved him or hated him, they were all talking about him. As the media frenzy continued, J.D. Vance went about his day as usual. He wasn't one to obsess over Twitter trends or cable news debates, but even he couldn't ignore how the incident had taken on a life of its own. Then came the unexpected phone call. "Senator Vance," his aide said, voice tight with urgency. "You need to see this." A new video had surfaced, security footage from inside the restaurant, leaked anonymously. The clip showed a discussion in the kitchen between the restaurant manager and an unknown figure just minutes before Vance arrived. The conversation was muffled, but one phrase was crystal clear: "Make sure we turn him away. We've got the cameras ready." The implications were explosive. Had the whole thing been a setup? Vance frowned as he watched the video again. It wasn't just about the refusal of service anymore, this suggested something deeper, more calculated. Within hours, news outlets picked up the story. Leaked footage suggests J.D. Vance restaurant incident was staged, but by whom? Speculation ran wild. Was it the restaurant owner? A political activist? An outside group trying to provoke a reaction? While some dismissed the footage as inconclusive, others demanded answers. Even critics of Vance hesitated. If this had been an orchestrated stunt, who was really pulling the strings? Vance, however, stayed measured. He addressed the revelation in a brief statement: "I don't know who set this up, but I do know one thing: Americans deserve better than political theater." We need real conversations, not staged outrage. But behind the scenes, he was asking his own questions. Who leaked the footage? And why? Something about the whole situation didn't sit right. And as he dug deeper, he realized, this was just the beginning. J.D. Vance sat in his Senate office, replaying the leaked footage on his laptop. The grainy black and white security feed showed the restaurant manager speaking to the unidentified figure, their voices muffled except for that one damning phrase, "Make sure we turn him away. We've got the cameras ready." But who was behind it? His aide, Michael, leaned against the desk, shaking his head. This wasn't some random act of protest. Someone wanted this to happen. Someone wanted you in that situation, on camera, making headlines. Vance nodded. The question is, who benefits? Michael exhaled sharply. Could be activists trying to make conservatives look like professional victims. Could be establishment Republicans setting you up for a PR boost. Could even be, he hesitated, lowering his voice, someone trying to ruin you. Maybe they were hoping you'd react badly. Vance's jaw tightened. He knew politics was dirty, but this was something else. Just then, Michael's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and went pale. "Senator, you're gonna want to see this." He turned the screen toward Vance. A breaking news report flashed across a major network. Exclusive, anonymous source confirms J.D. Vance restaurant incident was coordinated by. Developing. Before Vance could react, his office line rang. The number was unknown, but he answered. A distorted voice came through the receiver. "You're asking the wrong questions, Senator. This goes higher than you think." Vance's blood ran cold. "Who is this?" A brief pause. Then the voice whispered, "Watch your back." Click. The line went dead. Michael stared at him. What the hell was that? Vance didn't answer. His mind was racing. This wasn't just political theater anymore. This was something bigger. And someone, somewhere, didn't want him to find out the truth. J.D. Vance slowly set the phone down, his mind racing. Whoever had just called him wasn't some internet troll or an angry activist. This was calculated. Michael swallowed hard. "Senator, this isn't just about some restaurant PR stunt. Someone is playing a bigger game." Vance nodded. He had been in Washington long enough to recognize when things were orchestrated. But now, the question wasn't just who, it was why. The breaking news alert on Michael's phone flashed again. He refreshed the page. Anonymous source claims high-level political operatives involved in J.D. Vance restaurant setup. Vance leaned forward. "Can they name anyone?" Michael scrolled. "Not yet. But they're hinting at connections to a major donor network." He looked up, brow furrowed. "Dark money." Vance exhaled. Dark money, the untraceable political funding that poured into both parties from powerful figures who operated behind the scenes. People who could make or break a candidate. His mind went to his political enemies first. Was this a smear campaign? An attempt to create a false controversy around him? Or, more chillingly, was it meant to boost his public image for a reason he didn't yet understand? Before he could respond, his office door swung open. His chief of staff, Emily, stepped in, looking pale. "Senator, we just received an encrypted email from an unknown address." She set her phone on his desk and played the message aloud, "Stop looking. You don't want to know." Attached to the email was a single image, blurry surveillance footage, zoomed in on a shadowy figure leaving the restaurant through the back door. No face, no defining features. But the timestamp was clear. It was taken minutes after Vance had been turned away. Michael's face darkened. Someone doesn't just want to silence you. They want you afraid. Vance stared at the screen. His pulse steadied, his expression unreadable. He had fought in the Marine Corps. He had survived Washington's political machine. He wasn't going to be intimidated. He stood up. Find out where that email came from. And get me a list of every major donor who has money tied to that restaurant. Michael hesitated. Senator, if you push too hard, I don't care, Vance interrupted, his voice firm. Whoever did this thinks they're untouchable. I want to know who's pulling the strings. Emily and Michael exchanged uneasy glances but nodded. As Vance sat back down, he glanced at the phone on his desk. He knew one thing for certain, whoever had just threatened him had underestimated the wrong man. J.D. Vance didn't waste time. Within hours, his team had traced the encrypted email to a proxy server commonly used by high-level political operatives. It was meant to be untraceable, but his staff had contacts, people who owed him favors. By morning, they had a name. David Calloway. A shadowy figure in Washington politics, known for orchestrating smear campaigns and information warfare. He had ties to both parties, depending on who was paying. Michael placed a thick folder on Vance's desk. Calloway was hired 2 months ago by a PAC with undisclosed donors. And guess what? He tapped a document. That PAC funneled money into the restaurant's owner's account right before your visit. Vance clenched his jaw. It had all been a setup, from the hostess refusing service to the viral outrage. Someone had scripted the entire event, knowing it would dominate headlines. But the real question remained, why? Emily flipped a page in the file. This wasn't just about embarrassing you. It was about control. She turned the folder toward him, revealing a list of the PAC's top donors. Vance's eyes narrowed as he scanned the names: corporate lobbyists, establishment elites, and even a few high-profile figures from his own party. They weren't trying to destroy him. They were trying to own him. Michael's voice was grim. They wanted to manufacture a controversy, boost your profile, make you dependent on them when the dust settled. They wanted you to owe them. Vance exhaled, his mind sharpening. They had underestimated him. Instead of keeping quiet, he did what no one expected. He walked straight to the press. At an impromptu press conference outside the Capitol, Vance held up the documents. Last week, I was denied service at a restaurant. Today, I can confirm that the entire event was staged, bought and paid for by political operatives who thought they could manipulate me. The press erupted in questions. He continued, his voice steady, this isn't about me. This is about the corruption that controls Washington. They create fake outrage, divide Americans, and use it to consolidate power. Well, I have a message for them. He looked straight into the cameras. I am not for sale. The story exploded. Suddenly, the focus wasn't on the restaurant but on the deep state manipulation at play. The PAC donors scrambled to distance themselves, Calloway vanished from the public eye, and the restaurant owner issued a panicked statement claiming he had no idea what had happened. By the end of the week, the entire operation had backfired. J.D. Vance wasn't just a senator who had been refused service, he was now the politician who had exposed Washington's dirtiest tricks. And the people who tried to control him? They had just made him more powerful than ever.